I'm really excited about today, and we've been planning this for quite some time. I love to talk. I love to bring people together. But to me, there's no more important topic than firefighter health and wellness. We hear about all this other innovation, all this other technology, all this other stuff happening, but really none of it really matters unless we have healthy and functional and operational firefighters. So that's why I wanted to bring together this conference here, to bring together some of the best thought leaders in the space to talk about this important topic. And I should make them earlier, but Cindy, Allison, and Nathan, we're getting a little bit of audio feedback. So sometimes when you're not speaking, if you can turn your audio on and off, that would be helpful. So just perfect, that went away. So when you talk again, press it. But really excited to have some of the best speakers here. My job as the host is really to be the setter in a volleyball game and just set a bunch of perfect sets to all these great spikers around me who are some of the brightest minds. And I think a lot of you have heard that firefighters are dying a lot of preventable ways. Reference to COVID right now, it's a lot of it out of our control. But health and wellness and some of these proactive things we can do to prevent these preventable deaths are something that we can't control. We hear about cancer, we hear about heart attack, we hear about suicide. Why are those happening, and what can we be done? So I am excited to have these other four speakers with here with me today to communicate on this. And we're going to start with just a quick introduction, and I'll start from my right to left and give a little intro, and we'll jump into some good questions. But if Camilio, if you wanted to get off mute and start us off with a quick little 60-second intro on who you are and what your role is and what you do around health and wellness.
Yeah, sure. I'm Gamali Albert from Maryland. I work for Howard County Fire and Rescue, and I'm also an advocate for National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. I'm a certified health coach and a certified personal trainer, and I studied health and wellness educational issues and sort of underlying problems in grad school, and so I've been working in Howard County Fire and Rescue to try to help develop programs that will address those issues.
I'm Allison Berry, and I am an assistant professor at Pittsburgh State University in Pittsburgh, Kansas. I have been working with the tactical population for the last 4-ish years. I've worked with several different fire departments and one police department looking at cardiorespiratory fitness and physical activity interventions.
Great. Nathan, my screen went out for a sec, but you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Nathan Dix. I am an assistant professor at Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota. I'm also a veteran of the Army for about 21 years. So a lot of my research interest has been in the tactical professional population with fire, law enforcement, military, and really just kind of looking at different exercise testing techniques, load carriage training. And really, over the last, as Allison had mentioned, we've worked together probably for about the last 4 years in the Fargo-Moorhead area, and then now with where her new position is down in Pittsburgh, Kansas. So really just kind of focusing in on those aspects and really just trying to help and use research to kind of help drive some directives and some policies in different departments.
Great. And Cindy?
And good morning, I'm Cindy L. coming to you from DeLand, Florida. I'm a retired firefighter paramedic from Anne Arundel County, Maryland. And that is where my research began into firefighter cancer almost 30 years ago. Identified the initial cohorts both in Maryland for building cancer rates as well as across the country. And then we started looking globally at this. Started the Firefighter Cancer Foundation in 2004. So we were the first out to really look at this in a more official manner, and also trying to figure out where do we go with this and what do we do with this whole topic of firefighter cancer at the time. Many didn't even understand that we had cancer building until 2006. Fast forward, I have an incredible team from not only all over the US, but we are actually global as well, with a chapter in Australia, folks throughout Europe and other countries, including South America now, that are giving us feedback on not only the current health and wellness trends, because folks are at different levels of exposure and times of exposure and latencies for the chemicals versus the diseases, but also looking at this isn't a one-stop fix all for everybody. So how can we better mitigate the different needs in all the health and wellness arena, how it all interrelates? And we're taking a particular focus with the tech and the research tracks, particularly to help drive that forward. And really appreciative for this relationship with Kevin, smartfirefighting.com, and WS Darley to make the difference in that arena.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for the quick introduction. And as I touched on briefly earlier, there's a lot that goes into this discussion. And learning from all you, there's the tactical side of how we operate, and then the lifestyle side of how firefighters live on a day-to-day basis. And I kind of wanted to start with a little general question and have it be somewhat of, again, the softballs that are going back and forth. Feel free to interrupt one another and add on to each other. But generally, what are some of the biggest health risks that firefighters, first responders face? And maybe you kind of start from right, Gamaliel, if you want to start, and just sort of generally top level, 40,000 foot level perspective in the sky, what are some of these biggest health risks that first responders face today?
Yeah, so I think the big three are heart attack, cancer, and suicide.
Mm-hmm.
There are risk factors that lead into those big three, but those are really the three that the industry is focusing on right now. And so if you want to go into more detail, once everyone takes a shot at it, we can. But if you want me to keep going right now, I can keep going on a little bit more about that.
We'll keep going around the horn, and we're going to dive more into those a little bit. Nathan?
All right, got my audio on now. Okay, yeah, I definitely agree with what he just said. I think a lot of the things that we've been looking at is really looking at sudden cardiac death, and a lot of that being caused to overexertion or stress, and obviously a lot of those cardiac issues result from low levels of cardiovascular fitness. So I think as we look at that as being the top number one, even with last year about 46% of the deaths were attributed to sudden cardiac death. So I think that's a right on point there with what he mentioned.
Allison?
Agree with what the three of them or the two of them just said, is that I think the focus on for Nate and I specifically is for sudden cardiac death, more focused on what we can do to prevent it. Increasing physical activity levels and wellness initiatives within fire departments. And I'm thinking we're going to go more into that later on, so I'll just kind of wait for that.
And Cindy?
So from a cancer standpoint, we're seeing that the nuance changes in the body are being missed. And this is the importance, and we'll go into more of this for the wellness programs. From a cancer standpoint, we're seeing the body break down and give these warning signs first, both in cardiac and mental health issues. And both of those directly correlate to the third. You can't segregate just one from the other parts of the body. All of them counter-influence each other. So this is important and very important because we're missing a lot of those early warning signs and early changes in the body with regards to cardiac signs and symptoms, mental health changes, and then obviously the physical of the actual diagnosis of cancer being what we consider usually later stage.
And it seems like with wellness, you hear a lot, whether it's a wellness coach for a general person or a first responder, it seems like, okay, if you eat well and you work out, you're going to be fine. But that's obviously a little bit easier said than done. And so as you speak of this wellness program, it's not just one day, eat broccoli and go do some sit-ups, but it's a full encompassing initiative, top down, that is so many things from nutrition, sleep, exercise, stress management. What is a wellness program, and maybe some examples of fire departments or fire institutions that are doing it well, and just what all does the wellness program entail, and what are some examples of it? And Gamaliel, if you want to start first.
Yeah, sure. So I like the analogy of first talking about the systems in our body. Everybody who's healthy has systems that develop naturally, respiratory system, cardiovascular system, reproductive system, and immune system, just to name a few. But organizations don't build systems automatically as they grow. Those systems have to be created by people who decide why that system is being built and then implement the system properly. And I think what we're seeing now is enough evidence, enough data to suggest that it's time for organizations in the fire service to be building what essentially is an immune system of the organization, something that monitors how the firefighters, the most expensive really, but the most important aspect of the fire service, how they're doing on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, and then have support systems, whether it's physical, mental, nutritional, have those systems in place to not only be preventive, but also to respond to issues that come up. And that can all be data-driven if you want to. That gets more expensive. But if there's no system in place, and if the only thing we care about is taking care of apparatus maintenance, and we don't care about the maintenance of our firefighters, then it's almost as if like our body doesn't have an immune system that's active, but on the organizational level.
Well put. Nathan, what do you think? What do you got to say there?
Yeah, I really don't have a whole lot to add there. I think just the analogy of the different systems in the body is a great example, especially at an organizational level, and trying to. I think a lot of it is just what is it going to drive? Is it buy-in from the top of the leadership level, or is it policy driven? I think there's a little bit of both of those that kind of get involved in making sure that again, the firefighters are being taken care of at various levels and different systems are tended to.
Cindy or Allison, any thoughts on that?
I think too, like to add on that, is that fire departments shouldn't be afraid to switch that. Is that our systems and our bodies are ever evolving, and the wellness programs have to evolve as well. Is that what we did 10 years ago might not be good for right now, because we learn things as we go through these processes. And the more that we're okay with change instead of a cookie cutter approach is probably going to be like what works for a department in one area might not work for another department. And that's okay. And I think that has to be something that has to be emphasized in this, is that one wellness department program might work really well, but if you implement that exact one into your department, is the same thing. Is it top down? Like, do you have everyone buying into it? If not, what can we change to get everyone to buy in? So I think that if you look at that from that 4,000-foot view, it has to be what's good enough for your specific department.
And some additional points to throw in when you're looking at return on investment. And you've all hit the human factor is actually, that is really the most expensive piece of the fire department that we have. It's also the most rarely turned over. When you look at reducing absenteeism and improving productivity of our workforce, reducing injuries, as well as just maintaining and improving employee morale, all of this comes into the importance and ties into your wellness programs. You can't just address the high-risk people or just the high-risk issues. And I feel like we're trying to sort of a la carte the buffet right now and pick and choose, where do we spend our money? And we get that question a lot. Okay, how do I pull or select these particular blood tests versus this particular avenue of testing versus these courses of education and reinforcement for our firefighters and our first responders? It's all important. It's a matter of, again, like you said, tailoring to the profile of your department. And a lot of departments don't realize their own profile. They haven't actually looked at the further out projections of, well, if we have these particular exposures in our immediate service area or within our immediate community, how does it affect our department and how we respond and how our workforce responds to that? The data collection is a huge, huge important part that we're just catching up on, I feel now. And that does support, obviously, the various aspects of wellness as well. But one size definitely does not fit all. There are key components that should be included, however, for all these programs, certainly in some effect.
Well said. And I think a big thing to note is that evolution is happening all around us from external factors, and we need to adapt. And changing our mind is a strength in a lot of ways, but it's how do we kind of break free of maybe some of the traditional mindset. And I want maybe you just kind of riff on this. What are some of the barriers to actually adopting a program? I mean, is it more of a cultural thing, or is it you know, and maybe it seems like if the boss isn't into it, if you're trying to be healthy at the lower level, it's just, I don't know if you can get ridiculed or what, but what are some of these cultural or kind of lifestyle barriers that exist within the fire department that inhibit individual or institutional wellness initiatives? To be any of you.
I think one thing is, and I say this as a union member in my union, but the unions have a very strong stance on sort of creep from management when it comes to getting more data or having more teeth. And so I'm also currently in the military as a reservist, and in the military there is a weigh-in. You have to make weight every year. Most fire departments don't do that, and that's because the unions protect against that type of stuff. And so if there's no teeth to a wellness program, then everything you're doing has to sort of be preventative, and you have to find ways where you can implement program initiatives that can't be fought against. So like put it in the academy, for instance. That is a management right. You can put something in the academy and have new recruits learn that. Whereas once they're incumbent members of the department, there's a lot less you can do. And I think the other major thing I'll mention is HIPAA laws. Yes, we get a lot of available data through medical exams every year, but the question is, can you mine that data? Our department allows us to do aggregated data, so we can see from a department level standpoint what the obesity rate looks like, but we can't target individuals because we aren't allowed to sort of unmask, if you will, which individuals have which issues. And so therefore you're stuck doing things voluntarily, and anyone who doesn't want to participate doesn't really have to participate.
I think we need to be more creative in motivating the workforce. I spent many years as an IFF representative for my department and continue to support folks from the different labor sides and labor processes. Fit for duty is a huge kind of double-edged sword right now that we've continued to look at and try to be creative with. And the HIPAA is a great point that, yes, it protects the person as individual. It can work against us with regards to trying to do that trending that's so important for projecting where is the health of our workforce going, and how do we best bring in programs that can stay ahead versus playing catch up as the health of our folks either decline or improve. But finding the ways to motivate the individual to take personal responsibility for their own health and their own wellness, and to, I think, create almost more of a symbiotic partnership between the employee and the department, irregardless of whether they're career and volunteer. They're providing a vital service to their community, and they're a vital piece of again, that apparatus list, as you said, if you will, in keeping them working healthily.
Nathan or Allison, any other final thoughts on that, or continued thoughts on that?
I think also is that, it depends what the person who's initiating the wellness program, what they believe their 4,000-foot view is of that department. Because if they come in with their own ideas without actually talking to the firefighters themselves and getting an idea of what the firefighters want, I think that if we do outside contracting or anything like that without having, again, the data, and again, that is a barrier with the unions, is that you don't have the data and you just have this idea of what you want to do, but you don't know the direction based off that department. That also is a huge barrier to the buy-in, is that now you have this outside person coming in and saying, this is what you need, but we don't actually know if that's what they need. So I think that when we're looking at it, it has to be a buy-in that everyone has to come to the table. It has to be the head, top to bottom. Like everyone has to come in and everyone has to be on the same page, because you can't just say, well, the chief wants this, but no one else wants this. Mm-hmm. Or the bottom wants this, but the top doesn't want it. So I think that, Nate and I have experienced some of that with the departments that we have worked with in the past and currently, is that, you have to see what the best way is to get them actively involved. And a lot of it is taking the time to get to know those individuals and getting to know them as a person, and not just someone who's an employee, because there's are humans too, you know, like what's going to be the best thing, not only for them as a firefighter, but when they leave and retire and go on to live the second phase of their life. Like, how are we going to get them to be healthy and proactive to do what they want to do once they leave the service?
One thing I'll just add, Kevin, and this is to sort of, I guess, complement what Cindy said about individual responsibility, which I completely agree with. I will add, though, that for things that the department wants their firefighters to do, there is a level of organizational responsibility. So for instance, I'll use the example of face pieces. If we want our firefighters to wear face pieces throughout a fire and also overhaul, we have to train them how to use the face piece. We have to give them a face piece, and then we have to educate them on why they need to wear it throughout overhaul. If we want them to care about heart disease and cancer and suicide, and we want them to be proactive in trying to be responsible to prevent those things, then the department should educate on that. They can't just say, it's your individual responsibility, go do it, right, and not educate them and not give them the resources to do it. So I would just add that. And once those are given, then the department can wash their hands and say, look, we've given you all these things. We've prepared you. Now it's your responsibility. And I would just add that to what Cindy was saying.
Yeah, if I can also add on to that, I think in regards to wellness programs, I think being transparent in what your program goals are and the focus is going to be, so that gets communicated all the way down to the lowest level too. I've come into various different agencies of, you know, hey, we're going to start talking about wellness, and everybody assumes that now I'm going to have a personal trainer come in and teach me to work out. And they forget about all the other components of wellness that we're trying to focus in on, and that a holistic concept of wellness. So I think that's the other part of it too.
One additional piece, you know, we do a great job of training our recruits and getting them in incredible physical and mental and preparatory condition to come out to the field, you know, for this, this area of work. But then I feel like then life changes. They come out to reality. So they leave the cocoon of the perfect world of academy. They come out to the real world, the fire service, the streets, and then it's like things start getting thrown out the window. So finding more of a bridge, if you will, between that controlled life of academy life, and you can actually see the fall offs at particular benchmarks in folks' career with regards to kind of where their health commitment and wellness commitment seems to be. Some of it probably is related to the mental health aspect of this and their coping mechanisms and how that's addressed within a department as individuals. But it's a kind of a conglomerate of things that then sort of come at the person to continue to shape or reshape them once we get them out of the cocoon of academy and bring them into the real world. So I think if we can, as leaders, find better ways to, you know, bridge that out and strengthen that during their career time, provide them with that more than adequate education that should be followed through in these different components to encourage them to buy in. I think those are all great points.
It was a great discussion, and I think one thing that I've heard a few times is the data of understanding whether it's the ROI or the effectiveness, and really kind of some type of validation program to know if firefighter is healthy or not. And Nathan and Alice, I know you've published a lot of work on this in terms of kind of understanding that cardiovascular health and trying to get some sort of just sort of means of understanding where firefighters are at. So can you give us some context on kind of how to understand firefighter health and wellness from a cardiovascular standpoint, and then also kind of what's being done to evaluate and validate the firefighter wellness?
Nate, you can go.
And then you got to turn your audio on first. There you
go. So I guess I'll kind of kick this off a little bit. So I guess Allison and I have really kind of looked into, you know, working with various programs and kind of understanding how different departments assess cardiovascular fitness. just based on, some of the underlying causes on, lack or low levels of cardiovascular fitness, which are leading to all these deaths that we can probably prevent with various ways. So looking at that in regards to testing and understanding, and that's through, measuring cardiorespiratory fitness. And that can be done various ways through either submaximal testing or maximal testing. And we usually measure that in terms of like VO2 max. And some of the research that's been out there, some of the stuff that Alice and I have looked at is kind of going off that benchmark of 42 milliliters per kg per minute as like the minimal threshold to ensure that firefighters can continue to engage in their job-related tasks, just based on a lot of data that was published based on doing specific ground tasks. So when we look at the two different testing measures, I guess submaximal is obviously going to be a little bit faster. It requires a little less equipment. But just based on some of this research that we've been looking at, it's based on regression equations, and a lot of times it can overestimate for firefighter populations. So what Allison and I have kind of done, looking at different ways to adjust graded exercise tests, where it's not just running on a treadmill or doing a bike, is actually doing something that's occupationally specific. So actually wearing the PPE, conducting on a treadmill where they're continuously increasing incline, so we can assess their physical activity levels and also fizzing it that way. So that's kind of some of the work that we've done. We published a little bit of that. We have a little bit more that we're continuing to work on and getting that published. So I guess that's just kind of a quick run over, and I'm sure Allison can add a little bit in here and there on that.
I think Nate hit the nail on the head for a majority of that, but I think also what we have to look at is that if you do the maximal exercise too, all the information that you can get out of the graded exercise test, because it can also show you the functionality of the heart as well. And that's something that, although when we have firefighters go to their annual exams, if they have some fire departments don't even have that, but that's a component that we're not looking at. We're not really stressing the heart as it should be, because we're not looking at that as how can we prevent it. And preventing it would be doing these graded exercise tests to see that. Problem is that how do you get access to individuals who can actually go in on this and actually read the test and conduct the test? And I think that's where Nate and I have discussed a lot of the collaborations between universities or even hospitals, getting into this, and, everyone trying to stay almost on the same what type of tests to do and how they actually are going to conduct that. And so I think that that's something that, as we continue our work, that's really what we're focusing on, is how do we actually help expand this and make this into an annual testing program. Part of the NFPA guidelines is, how are you going to do it and make it a maximal test that we can get this proper information from, and also understand why firefighters might have the issue of an adverse cardiac event while on the job.
You throw in a couple of points. One thing a lot of fire departments overlook is partnerships with their local hospitals. Many hospitals have a benevolent side, and there is money available that can be spent on both health and wellness testing, but also even enhancement programs. And then same with local universities. By utilizing those resources that are within your first two areas, you're not only helping them from an educational standpoint and research standpoint, but obviously you're now easing your budget in money that you have to find for some of these areas. And you're also tapping into young, fresh minds many times in this. A great point you mentioned, PPE does change how we move, how we feel, how we function. It throws our bodies off balance, and also how the body actually functions from a cardiac and respiratory standpoint. Studies are continuing to increase, showing a potential for thickening of our blood with increased time of wearing PPE, and the core heat factor of what builds, and the actual effects of long-term wearing of PPE on our systems. Individuals knowing and understanding what their max heart rate is. Lay odds, enough folks probably do not have an idea of what their max heart rate should be. That's a great teaching point, and something, again, that we can enhance through our processes. And then obviously training adjuncts and training things that are supported by departmental policies and appropriately trained and certified, staff and experts that can be brought in to advise. This world of now Zoom and electronic communications, you now can bring a trainer in electronically. You don't have to physically necessarily bring them in. Although you did raise a great point, having that person connecting with the individuals to get that input and to understand psychologically how and what drives them as people, and also what drives that workforce and how they work together and how they gel is very important, because every crew functions differently and has a unique inherent personality. And you have to take that into consideration as well.
I would like to just add that I think we definitely want to start partnering more with universities where we can, and researchers like Allison and Nathan, but a lot of fire departments don't have that, and so we do have to remember that on more realistic level, we don't have the ability all the time to look at VO2 max exact numbers, or some fire departments don't even do their annual cardiac tests the way that NFPA 1582 wants them to do, which hopefully, if they're doing it right, they're getting up to 12 METs on the Bruce protocol. What I just put in the chat box is a link to something that was published by IAFC. It's a METs equivalent chart to show different activities on the fire ground. And one of the activities is carrying tools upstairs, which they say is 12.5 METs. Search and rescue is 16 METs. And the reason I bring that up is because, like Nathan said, it is important to do exercise in your gear to remind yourself how hard that stuff is and to acclimate yourself to doing that work. But what we also try to suggest in Howard County is just do something, even if that's not what you're doing for the day. What we see a lot of times is firefighters not doing anything. Mm-hmm. And they're not getting high enough METs, even if it's through running or biking. And so what we've seen through the research, and there is published stuff about firefighter cardiac deaths that say something to the tune of 90% of firefighters that die of cardiac death have already diagnosable heart disease, essentially. And that's not because they weren't training in their gear. That's because they weren't training at all. Right. And so I think we have to remember to add in that layer of education, which is if we want to prevent heart attack deaths, we need people just getting out of sedentary mode and into a vigorous exercise mode, which is beyond 6 METs, which is, by the way, very low, because if we're required to hit 12 METs and we're only doing the bare minimum of vigorous activity, which is like, let's say 6 to 8 METs, that's still too low. That's like jogging when we're required to be running uphill or bringing tools upstairs. But you can reach those METs. You can reach 12 or even 20 METs just by running. The problem is we don't even do that a lot as firefighters. So how do we even breach that issue?
I think, so to add on that, is that METs are absolute values, right? So for instance, Nate is a marathon runner. Nate running at 6 miles an hour, Nate's not going to be at 12 METs. I will be at 12 METs because I don't like running, right? So it's important to realize that too, is that it's not as cookie cutter for everyone. So getting up and moving, I think, is a better initiative to talk about than necessarily MET values, because it's just so different for each person. Because MET values, again, are absolutes. They're not relative to each person's physical ability. So again, that comparison of 12 METs for someone else versus 12 METs for me might be something that's completely different. So I think like the better idea is just to get people up and moving. And that's another study Nate and I are hoping to get published out here soon, is that we actually tracked physical activity in firefighters for 7 to 14 days that encompass their on-duty and off-duty shifts. And the majority of the time, we're talking about 10 hours a day, firefighters are in sedentary behavior. But the important thing to also realize is that that's the average population as well. It's just, as a whole, we are not healthy individuals in America. And so I think that it's more important to, again, get on that, is that get up and move and not sit all day. I mean, as I say here, and I sit all day at my job, but like trying to do that's important too, is that just get up and move, interact with your family, go for a walk, do things that are going to get you up and moving instead of just sitting all day. And not really, I guess my thing is, since we're all so sedentary, is maybe not focus 100% on just like go balls to the wall and get all this intensity out, is rather that just get up and move and try and work your way up and progress to that more vigorous intensity. Because we know that if you go from a sedentary behavior and all of a sudden the fire bell rings, the fire alarm goes off, and now we have an increased chance or likelihood of having that adverse cardiac event as well. So something to kind of just follow up.
Yeah, so Allison, it's a great point. Yes, METs aren't the same for every single person. The way we approach it in the academy is we tell firefighters to just, it's based on exertion level for that person. So, if we start with the farthest exertion, which is about 10 seconds per person, of all out activity, if you're activating the creatine phosphate part of energy, you have about 10 seconds of all out exertion, and we can use analogies for that. Maybe that's like breaching a wall or pulling somebody out of a rescue situation or something, or all out sprinting. And the question is, are you getting even close to that in your exercise? And so if you're going into the weight room and you're walking on the treadmill and you think you exercised, then we have to, maybe re-examine that. What we want is something, maybe close to that 80% exertion rate for some amount of time. And yeah, we can throw away the METs just to simplify it. But yeah, we're talking about exertion for that person. Because like you said, everybody has a different level where they're going to meet their maximum exertion. And that's not going to be the same from one person to the next.
So I want to steer the conversation a little bit towards another subtopic within this health and wellness umbrella around sort of some of the tactical stuff. I'm back. Around some of the tactical stuff in terms of what are some things that fire departments or individual firefighters, steps they can take, or even on further to that, what are some technologies or innovations that are helping train or monitor first responders in a way that's empowering the fire department or the individual firefighter to take better action or monitor the whole wellness initiative more effectively? If any of you have any thoughts or comments, want to start on that.
Well, there is a company called FireHUD, and they've created a product that would be essentially like a wearable technology that the firefighter puts on. I suppose it's when they're on the fire ground, but maybe it's all day at the firehouse. And that technology uses heart rate, and I guess they can calculate steps. And what they essentially create is an exertion level monitor for the individual. And so they have sort of like a green, yellow, red stage area, which I think is kind of cool. But I think going to the logical end of that is eventually, I'd like to see all firefighters wearing a wearable technology, whether it's an iWatch or a Whoop or whatever, because we really should be tracking not only exertion throughout the day, and like Allison said, how long are you sitting versus how long are you moving? How long are you actually getting into that higher exertion, vigorous activity mode, but also how's your sleep?
Right.
Because as firefighters, our schedule is 24/48. And I joke around a lot of times. I say firefighters are either working 48 24s or 72 zeros because they're coming in for overtime and then they're working another job on their off days, and they never do get that good sleep. And then they come into the firehouse and say, I need a safety nap, which is fine. I'm all about safety naps. But if that's the only time you're getting sleep and you're not getting it at work and you're not getting it at home, then over time that's going to destroy your physical health. So some sort of wearable technology, I think, needs to be in our future adoption as fire departments.
Agreed.
Yeah, taking a look at hydration is something that we can self-assess easily, and that's a low-cost measure that individuals and departments can certainly assist with as well. The sleep factor, that is a big one, because when you look at the average work schedule for folks, they're lucky if they're getting 2 to 3 nights of sleep uninterrupted, that maybe allows them to get in deep REM, depending on the schedule they're choosing to work, and then also their requirements at home when they do get home. And that's the restorative time of the body when healthy cells are regenerated. So we're cutting that corner, and that's one of the first things that we tend to cut out of our lives is sleep, so that we can fit everything else in. And then looking at obviously nutrition, and the nature of how we address nutrition, and the selections that we're making both on and off duty with regards to nutrition, and that includes alcohol use as well. It's an easy crutch to use, and use prevalently within our service as first responders. And it's something that we need to be, I think, better supportive of each other in. Our culture many times surrounds drinking, and it has its place. And those that have known me through my 35 years of fire service, I've been in many of those events just as much as anyone else. But you have to look at those effects overall on your health and make healthy choices for yourself as well. And that's tempering. Okay, if I'm going to have an outing and go out drinking, I need to also take a look at recovery time, and then look at prep time before I go into work to report to duty. You know, have I pre-hydrated to offset what I've done in my off hours? Whether it is through exercise and through family living, or through other things that we choose to do in our lives.
I think Cindy brought up a good point too about the hydration, is that it is an easy measure that we can do. And actually, Nate and I were working on a training study recently that we actually had our firefighters wear polar heart rate monitors and watches, and it does all that. But in addition, we actually looked at hydration status, and they would tell us, we had a urine color chart, and they would tell us that as well. And I think it's trying to combine technology, right? Everyone wants to have some sort of smartwatch, whether it's accurate or not. It's going to help us get up and move. And so even if it helps to see your step count or how intense your activity was that day, I think it's a good way for firefighters just to get a general idea of what they're doing. And, you know, the heart rate monitors and watches that we had definitely showed us, you know, in real time too, while they were training, what their heart rate levels were, and we could see it and kind of modulate the exercise that way. So just like Gamelia was telling, is that, you know, we can actually see that and see how to modulate that, and to see exactly that, is that what intensity are they working at? Were they sandbagging it, or were they just going all out? And we were like, well, okay, I don't know if you're going to have enough to get you to the end type thing. So it does a good job of allowing people to kind of gauge their intensities that way. And you can see too where your heart rate levels are, which is important too, is that not a lot of people understand where their heart rate max is. You know, via estimation equations is fine, but where are you actually at when you're working out is a whole different story.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to what Allison's saying. You know, as a firefighter, I have sat through shift transitions, and I've seen, you know, firefighters come in and, you know, the lieutenant or the captain, you know, do a spot check and say, hey, are you good? You know, were you up partying too late last night or whatever? And the firefighter says, yeah, you know, I'm good. And it's on the lieutenant really to say either you need to go home or you can stay. If somebody comes in with alcohol on their breath and the lieutenant lets them stay, it's the lieutenant's responsibility if they screw something up. And that's a fairly clean cut issue. No one's going to sort of debate that issue. But I think going forward now with the data that we're having, and also to bring in another component, which is the PSOB, the Public Safety Officers Benefit Act, which does pay out a lot of money if you die of heart attack. Well, if somebody's coming in and we can demonstrate that, no, they did not get sleep last night, and now they're driving a heavy rig, which, you know, CDL laws require certain things. I know fire departments are a lot of times exempt, but how does all that start to play in? I mean, if we know somebody is coming in, they haven't exercised in the last month, they haven't had any good sleep, they're not hydrated, and we could have the ability to show that through data, and yet the lieutenant or the captain is saying, no, you're good, and then they die on duty.
Yeah.
But everybody turns a blind eye to the fact that everyone sort of recognized that for months or years. You know, that's you know, the elephant in the room, if you will, or, to use another term that's more blatant for fire service, that's the obese firefighter in the room that no one wants to talk about. And no one wants to say, hey, I don't know that you're ready to ride today. But the question is, how do you address that with all of the factors in place that are protecting firefighters from getting called out or from getting put into a physical rehabilitation program? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that if we had data and we could put it on the lieutenant or the captain from a watch and say, this person hasn't slept, they haven't exercised in the last month, there's no signs that they're ready for shift work today. Are you good with them riding? Now it's on you, lieutenant or captain. But up until now, if there's no data, it's really easy for them to say, yeah, they're good to ride, because I don't know. I can't tell them no.
Yeah, the data takes the subjectivity out of it and makes it more objective. That's a great point.
Nathan, I saw you may have wanted to say something earlier. I wasn't sure if there was something we missed, but if you had anything else to add there.
No, I think that's on point. As a researcher working with various departments, sometimes you try to softly put that, to the point where, hey, there's some guys on your department that I'm generally concerned about, as their physical activity levels are so low. Testing their cardiovascular fitness is very low for somebody who's younger than I am. And yeah, I think that sometimes if you can have that data set to push that forward to, whether it's the lieutenant or the captain or the chief, hey, we need to probably focus on these specific individuals. I definitely see that, especially as we start to bring in these different wellness aspects.
Great. And so we've got a lot of great chats here, and we've got another 13, might go a little bit longer, minutes or so here. So if you got any other questions, keep firing them in the chat. But I think one that I see that maybe hasn't been fully answered was from Richard Miller, who, thank you for all your comments, Richard, is can you talk about all the components of a program? And here you talk about medical, fitness, injury, rehab, behavioral health costs, justification, data collection, implementation. I know we've talked a lot about this, but just bringing it back to the forefront, what are some other little nuances within the overall program that need to be considered? And also I'd like to maybe get some insights on what are some resources that others can take to start implementing programs within their departments.
So Kevin, I'll start off here with, for those interested in that, if you look at the IAFC WFI, the Wellness Fitness Initiative, they have a good publication. It's the 4th publication, and they talk about that. Also, the NFFF 16 life safety initiatives talk about that, and NFPA covers that in their 1500 and 1583 standards. And what they all agree on is that fire departments should be educating. They should have wellness programs, which can be defined differently depending on who you're talking to, but most departments consider that as some sort of pure fitness component and some sort of peer support or mental health component. I think nutrition is important as well. Some fire departments include a whole gamut of things like financial education and all that kind of stuff, which I think you can debate that. But then the last component is research. So education, some sort of wellness program, and research. All those 3 major organizations agree on that. OSHA says, from an employee standpoint, that employees need to be taught by their employer on how to avoid injury, illness, and death. That is their overall educational mandate. And that if an employer is not teaching their employees how to avoid illness, injury, and death on the job due to job-related activities, then the employer can be held at fault. Add that to the fact that there is already a PSOB that says if you die of heart attack, we're counting that as an on-duty issue. That means at a baseline, all employers in the fire service should be educating on preventing heart attack. And the nice thing about that is when you start educating on how to prevent heart attack, you inevitably touch upon other things that will extend to cancer prevention as well as mental health prevention. Because we know that the more you exercise, the better you get conditioned metabolically, that is connected to cancer occurrence as well. And also, the more you reduce obesity, the more you reduce cancer occurrence. We've already hard linked 13 cancers to obesity and overweight issues. So if you just focus on the heart cancer or the heart attack issue, you will cover these other things. And if that's the only thing you can justify because of the PSOB, then you're already a step into the game.
So some total fitness components, and you guys have done a great job of touching on these. Cardiovascular endurance, obviously, muscular strength, muscular endurance, flexibility. Flexibility directly relates, as well as body composition, to reduction of injuries and injury prevention also. Tying in, obviously, the risk factors to the cancers. You know, the body breaks down and gives us these signs earlier, both through changes in the endocrine system. So earlier diagnoses of, say, diabetes, low thyroid, low testosterone, other things that we see in an annual physical, and why that annual physical is so important in picking up, again, those nuanced changes, because other things in the body break down first, you know, before the heart thickens with left hypertrophy, which we see now is connected to these cardiac deaths, you know, on or post-fire ground, and continue to be studied. So all these components tying in will definitely correlate with each other. When you look at resources like the Wellness Fitness Initiative, fstarresearch.org has literally thousands of documents that anyone can search through on any given topic. And that's a great library to hit. National Fallen Firefighters obviously also creating those libraries as well. In addition to some of those others, you want to look at the NFPA, obviously 1500, 1581, 82, 83, 84, NIH.gov, National Institute of Health, CDC, U.S. Fire Administration, and there's a section both under FEMA and USFA.gov. Harvard Health, Mayo Clinic have also done very specific work as well in assisting with the fire service too. And then obviously the number of universities across the country now that are all engaging, that we're so thankful for, to help us in figuring out all these pieces to the puzzle. So all very important things.
I think one last thing to touch on is to get qualified people to help run the wellness initiatives within fire departments. And as much as I'm supportive of peer-to-peer support, I think too it's not a bad idea to have someone come in, a tactical strength and conditioning coach who is certified, to come in and do the fitness training for fire departments. Because then it kind of leads it out is that now it's coming from someone else. So it's not necessarily one person and everyone's going to target that one person because they don't like the training. Well, now it's someone who is qualified, has the standards to do it, and hopefully will come in and listen to what works for fire departments, and we'll be able to also, you know, track it, is to keep up with what's actually working with the department. How are people progressing? If they're not progressing, they should be able to then switch the mode of training and, you know, be able to individualize it for people as well. And again, it's kind of like hitting on what's important for your department, but same thing as what's been said is that if you target cardiovascular health, you'll target a lot of the issues as well.
Very true.
Yeah, on that note, Allison, we actually sent a couple of our peer fitness trainers. Our peer fitness trainers are all certified personal trainers. And I make that distinction because there is peer fitness programs where you're not certified. So our folks have to get certified. They have to get recertified every 2 years. We did send 2 of them down to the TSAT course. And we're hoping to bring that to our members here once all the COVID stuff ends, because we're not really planning to do physical fitness stuff over the webinars or whatever. But I do like that idea. And I do support the idea of having folks that are credentialed and know what they're doing in regards to wellness. And I try to make a comparison in the fire service world about special operations. I was in special operations division. I'm not anymore, but I'm certified in all the different courses. And we wouldn't allow people to be in special operations or to lead a special operations division without that, you know, specialized knowledge. And so it shouldn't be any different for health and wellness. I am a proponent in the idea that we should, as a fire department or fire service as a whole, be able to encourage and develop firefighters organically within the service. There are credentials you can get. You don't have to get a master's or a doctorate in something in order to become a certified personal trainer, certified health coach, whatever. and at least at some low level have some knowledge of this stuff, instead of just saying, oh, you raised your hand, let's put you in here, or you have the bugles, let's put you in here, because bugles don't mean you have the right knowledge to run a program. And so I do support that 100%. I do think we can do some of it organically in-house. And I think that if we're going to have a good wellness program, we should look at how do we raise the next generation of firefighters, or some of them, to be specialists in health and wellness, just like we do specialists for special operations or paramedics or whatever.
The other challenge is there is a high rate of turnover in those specialized positions in health and wellness. How often do departments look at the health and wellness position as kind of a catch-all for whoever just made promotion to captain or chief? Okay, you're now the health and wellness person, tag, you're it. They have no additional background in all these areas, and now they're expected to be the sudden expert in the 11th hour in a multitude of areas that take literally years of study and research. So I think as a fire service, we need to take that position more seriously and put more emphasis on that, because it really is kind of a gatekeeper position for your workforce health and how long those folks do survive in this job, not only while they're active duty, but also hopefully if they make it to retirement. And that's a big if anymore. So I think placing that importance on the health and wellness role, and also bringing folks up through the ranks with that training earlier and sooner before they're in that role. The departments that cultivate that really are the ones that seem to be doing it the best.
Yeah, as Gamil was saying earlier, doing that TSAT course, or getting the younger firefighters involved in that early in their career, regardless if they switch or they go to another agency or they switch over to another firehouse, they take that knowledge with them and be able to kind of permeate that across the formation. I think that's another great way to do that as well. So yeah, I think the certification part is definitely key. I've went into one department and I asked who was leading the physical training, and well, this guy is, because he played football in school, so he knows all about that stuff. So yeah, so we just got to kind of make sure that the right people are getting in those positions.
Good comments all around. So we got about 3 minutes left, and I don't want to go too far over the hour, but what I would like to do is give you all one last little 30-second to minute blurb of this kind of mic drop, just giving us some final fire thoughts here. I think my Wi-Fi might get out for a second, but any sort of final thoughts of wisdom, inspiration, or suggestions on places they can go to get resources. If you want to, Gamilio, if you want to start us off, just kind of final thoughts here and get us going.
Yeah, so here's some final thoughts to take away. Many of you have probably heard the phrase, "We are what we repeatedly do." It's attributed to Aristotle. It actually wasn't said by Aristotle, it was said by a guy named William Durant. But in any case, health and wellness is like that. Health is what we are, and wellness is what we repeatedly do. It's how we got to where we are. And the end of that quote is that excellence then is a habit, not an act. So really, it's about what our habits are, what our wellness habits are that get us to our health area. But the other side to that coin is it's not just we aren't just what we repeatedly do. The question should be, why do we do what we do? And I like to say, we do what we repeatedly see and hear. So if you're not educating about it, if you don't have models that are showing the right way to do things, especially if you promote somebody in front of the wellness bureau who's not a model of wellness, that's a problem. We do what we repeatedly see and hear. So it's about educating, talking about wellness a lot, and then showing how to be well and making sure that those people who are doing that are properly credentialed and leading the way from the front, not just willy-nilly.
Well said. Nathan?
Yeah, so not to repeat too much, but I also think some of the things we've already mentioned is, getting the data, being a little bit more data driven as well in that aspect of, with some of the stuff that Allison and I have done, that really gives a good snapshot, not only doing a physical exam or a wellness exam every year, but also assessing various levels of fitness and kind of understanding where our programs need to go, and implementing that peer trainers and helping out understand how do we make the next step? Here's a group that we need to work on to get their levels up, or we've got some that are high levels of physical or cardiovascular fitness. So I think that is another aspect of that. And we've kind of mentioned it before, but, just partnering with, local colleges or universities that have exercise science or kinesiology programs. I've got students that would just love to, work with, firefighters or police, or, do any of that type of thing to kind of further progress them in whether it's testing or learning in different ways to implement, health promotion or any of those different aspects. So I think those are also key parts of that. And I'm pretty sure regardless of the university or college that you reach out to, those faculty are more than willing to assist and help out in those areas. So thanks for this.
Thank you. Allison?
Kind of to piggyback off of what Nate said, is that please make sure that you reach out. Is that I know some fire departments have been burned by researchers, and it gives us a poor name, and Nate and I know it, and we just shake our head every time it happens. But that's not what we're here to do. If you ever need help, please reach out to us. We are more than happy to sit down and talk and make sure that, I'm not in the military, I'm not in fire, I'm not in police, but what I can do is make sure that you guys are safe and healthy. That's what my job is to do as a researcher, is not to benefit me, it's to benefit you. And that we want to make sure that whatever we can possibly do, and maybe it is that I have master students who are now looking, within the next year, will be looking for jobs in tactical strength and conditioning. And I think we've kind of beat it into them that don't take advantage of these individuals by now, hopefully. But I think it's something that we can all work together to do what needs to be done for the fire service.
Okay, and I guess wrapping a little bit here, starting with, again, coming out of fire school and our newest, brightest brains that are in amazing physical condition, let's find better ways to continue that throughout their careers. Also, every fire department, or I should say most fire departments, are blessed now to have a hazmat team. Let's utilize those chemistry brains for looking at what our exposures are, how we can reduce those exposures, whether it's the exposures that begin just by walking into a fire station, your cleaning materials, the building, diesel exhaust, et cetera, and the effects of those things alone, externally, what we are exposed to on a fire scene and through the calls and the work that we do, but also what we're bringing back to the station, what we're bringing home with us. COVID, I think, has awakened everyone in this industry about what we can potentially bring home and how it affects our families and impacts our families as well. That's been a huge wake-up call. Looking into our future and starting with the body systems, those body systems are giving us clues that's breaking down long before it does. We need to look at those clues, and we need to be more tuned in to what those are. Using your professionals that are available is huge, and we're under tapping those resources that are around us. So being more creative and finding those partnerships and creating those partnerships is definitely a way to look for the future. And last, as far as the cancer realm, we know that cancer is here in the fire service. It's as prevalent potentially as cardiovascular issues now. We've now correlated, again, what the risk factors are. We've been inherent in crafting those messages out. We now need folks to start looking at both the personal responsibility of their lifestyle and how that parlays into this, as well as how they function both on duty and off duty combined. Departments are all looking for that magic answer for how do we determine if cancer is here sooner. Keep watching, because biomarker testing, a variety of other adjuncts are coming on the horizon. As biometrics are improving, like the Firehead system, like a biometric ring now that's new on the market to, again, assess the body systems in real time. The more that we can get buy-in from the top down, and that's actually from our mayors, our cities, our councils, our municipalities, to use and application from the bottom up, from the line firefighter, from the initial base first responder. It's going to be very important, and all that data does need to be captured, because it's going to drive it, it's going to substantiate it, and this is how we figure out how to get it paid for and how to incorporate it in for the long term.
Very well put. Well, we're a little bit past the hour here, but I just want to, on behalf of smartfirefighting.com, Darley, and the entire fire industry, thank all of you for the work that you're doing, and for everyone that's attending. thank you for attending. We will be sending out the email recap of this along with the contact informations. And if you got any questions, I think one of the biggest things I heard here is reach out. And one of my biggest takeaways from this was just do something. So I challenge all of you listening now and later is do one thing different tomorrow and try and make some type of change from the ground up. And I think that can help cascade and domino into some larger things. So again, Gamaliel, Nathan, Allison, and Cindy, you're all rock stars. Thank you so much. And to all of you, have a great rest of your day. Stay safe and much love. Take care.